Cosmic rays pass by, particles moving near the speed of light, born in distant supernovas. In a world where billion-dollar fortresses crumble not from missiles, but from machines, no larger than a suitcase, Ukraine has rewritten the rules of modern warfare. Imagine 500 drones slicing through the night sky, defying radar, precision guided by courage and innovation, striking deep into the heart of what Russia once called impenetrable. This isn't just a story of explosions and metal, it's a story of brains, over brawn, of a smaller nation, proving that intelligence, unity and bravery can bring giants to their knees. The deployment of 500 drones in a single coordinated strike marks a decisive inflection point in how wars will be fought and won. What was once an auxiliary reconnaissance tool has become the spearhead of tactical innovation, democratizing access to offensive capabilities and shifting the calculus of power. Where armored columns and air superiority once determined battlefield outcomes, now a swarm of small, relatively inexpensive machines can penetrate defenses, degrade material, and impose strategic costs far out of proportion to their price. This is not simply a technological upgrade, it is a fundamental change in doctrine. Commanders who learn to think in terms of distributed, networked effects rather than concentrated mass gain an advantage that scales quickly. 100 low-cost drones, each with modest payload and precise coordination, can achieve cumulative effects comparable to a large expensive missile salvo, while offering redundancy. Losing some units does not doom the mission. That redundancy changes risk calculations for political leaders and military planners alike, because the human cost of deployment can be minimized when unmanned systems shoulder the danger. Equally important is how drones compress decision timelines. Aerial platforms that used to require elaborate basing, airspace control, and escort now operate with agility. They arrive, identify, strike, and exfiltrate with speed that outpaces many traditional command and control cycles. This temporal advantage forces defenders into a reactive posture and amplifies the value of rapid innovation, adaptable supply chains, and decentralized leadership. Learning to harness this tempo is as crucial as mastering the hardware. Forces that can iterate tactics between missions, apply lessons almost in real time, and integrate civilian technological advances will continue to outmaneuver slower, more bureaucratic adversaries. The psychological and economic impacts are also profound. The destruction of a high-value target once required prolonged campaigns and significant investment. Now a relatively inexpensive strike can undermine the aura of impregnability that large fortifications and arsenals once projected. The domino effect resonates beyond the battlefield. It shakes investor confidence in military spending, recalibrates insurance and reconstruction costs, and reshapes international perceptions of deterrence. When asymmetric, low cost means deliver high consequence outcomes, the mindset that underwrites defense procurement and alliance commitments must change. Nations that cling to legacy investments risk wasting resources on capabilities ill-suited to countering dispersed, networked threats. Moreover, the ascendancy of drones levels the playing field for smaller or resource-constrained states and non-state actors, intensifying the strategic unpredictability of conflict zones. Access to commercially available components, open-source software, and a global marketplace for sensors and communications means innovative teams can prototype and deploy effective systems rapidly. The barrier to entry for developing sophisticated strike packages has fallen, and with it comes a proliferation of actors capable of shaping events in ways that elude traditional deterrence postures. This diffusion of power places a premium on intelligence, cyber resilience, and the ability to craft norms that govern use. Because technological diffusion will continue regardless of regulatory intent. Finally, the human story behind drone dominance is instructive. It is often a tale of ingenuity under pressure. Technicians repurposing civilian platforms, engineers optimizing routing and swarm behavior, and tacticians blending asymmetry with discipline. That ingenuity is the real force multiplier. Technology alone does not guarantee victory. The edge belongs to those who combine creativity, disciplined execution, and ethical restraint. The debut of drone swarms on a grand scale is less an endpoint than a new beginning, an invitation to rethink doctrine, reorganize training, and reimagine what it means to defend and deter in the 21st century. The destruction of Russia's $500 million fortress was not merely a tactical victory. It was a symbolic earthquake that shook the very foundations of Moscow's perceived invincibility. This fortress represented more than bricks, steel, and defense systems. It stood as a physical embodiment of Russian confidence, technological pride, and military dominance. Its annihilation by a coordinated swarm of 500 Ukrainian drones turned that symbol into rubble, exposing deep cracks within Russia's strategic framework. What was once promoted as an unbreachable bastion of security has now become a lesson in vulnerability. The fall of this fortress marks a dramatic shift in modern warfare. It demonstrated that even the mightiest structures backed by billions of dollars and decades of planning can crumble within hours when confronted by innovation and precision. For Russia, the psychological impact of losing such a prized asset is immense. The fortress was a cornerstone of its regional defense network, meant to protect key logistical routes, communication centers, and weapon stockpiles. Its sudden collapse sent shockwaves through military command structures, forcing Russian generals to confront an uncomfortable truth that their defense architecture, designed for conventional assaults, is ill-prepared for the unpredictable, decentralized nature of drone warfare. The once assured sense of control has turned into uncertainty. The images of burning walls, scattered debris, and failed interceptors broadcast across global media did more than humiliate Russia militarily. They eroded the myth of Russian technological superiority that had long intimidated its neighbors. The economic loss is equally staggering. A fortress valued at $500 million is not just a static structure. It represents years of investment in defense research, labor, and logistics. Its destruction is a financial wound that cannot easily be bandaged. Rebuilding such a complex would require not just material resources, but time, something Russia lacks amid mounting pressures on multiple fronts. Furthermore, the cost-to-impact ratio is devastating for Moscow. Hundreds of millions lost in an instant, destroyed by drones that cost a fraction of that amount. This asymmetry highlights a deeper imbalance. Traditional military expenditure can no longer guarantee protection against agile, low-cost technologies. The era of grand fortresses and heavy armor is fading, replaced by an age where mobility, adaptability, and intelligence determine victory. For Ukraine, this operation was a strategic masterstroke. By targeting such a high-value and heavily fortified site, Kyiv demonstrated both technical sophistication and psychological awareness. The attack was as much about breaking morale as it was about inflicting material damage. The message was unmistakable. Nowhere is safe, no matter how heavily guarded, when innovation meets determination. Each explosion, each drone that pierced through radar defenses, carried a symbolic charge that Ukraine is capable of turning the tide, not through sheer numbers, but through creativity and resilience. In doing so, Ukraine transformed a single battle into a global spectacle, forcing the world to reconsider assumptions about military power and resistance. The fall of the fortress also reverberated internationally. Allies and observers took note of how rapidly and efficiently Ukraine executed the operation, while adversaries studied it as a warning. The attack exposed weaknesses in traditional defense systems worldwide, prompting nations to reassess their own readiness against drone swarms and electronic warfare. It underscored that the future battlefield will favor those who can innovate faster than their opponents can react. The strategic value of the strike, therefore, extends far beyond its immediate destruction. It reshapes doctrines, compels modernization, and challenges the complacency of global powers. In essence, the destruction of the Russian fortress symbolizes a collapse, not just of walls and steel, but of arrogance and outdated thinking. It is a reminder that no amount of money can buy true invulnerability. Strength today is measured not in the size of one's fortifications, but in the agility of one's mind, the speed of adaptation, and the courage to evolve. The ruins of that $500 million fortress now stand as a testament to a new truth. Innovation has become the ultimate weapon, and those who underestimate it will find themselves buried beneath their own pride. Ukraine's drone strike on the $500 million Russian fortress was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a declaration of resilience, intelligence, and national courage. In a war that has often seemed uneven, where one side commands immense resources and the other fights for survival, Ukraine's ability to orchestrate a coordinated attack using 500 drones speaks to a spirit that refuses to be crushed. This event was not simply about destroying a fortress, it was about sending a message to the world that courage, innovation and unity can outweigh the wealth and machinery of a superpower. Every drone in that operation represented not just a piece of technology, but the determination of a nation fighting for its right to exist, for its freedom, and for its dignity. Ukraine's use of drone warfare symbolizes a profound shift in the balance between power and purpose. When a smaller nation stands against a militarily superior adversary, the conventional assumption is that victory is determined by who has the larger arsenal or deeper pockets. But Ukraine has rewritten that narrative. The 500 drones were not just machines, they were extensions of human will, of engineers, soldiers and civilians who combined ingenuity and bravery to challenge an empire. Their success reminds the world that war is no longer won solely by those who have the most weapons, but by those who have the greatest resolve to fight intelligently and adapt quickly. Courage in this context is not blind aggression but the ability to transform limited resources into instruments of hope and resistance. What makes this moment especially significant is its moral dimension. The destruction of the fortress stands as a metaphor for how courage can dismantle oppression. For years, Russia projected an image of invincibility, portraying itself as an unshakable force that could impose its will through strength and intimidation. Ukraine's drone strike shattered that illusion. It proved that even in the shadow of overwhelming odds, bravery combined with creativity can yield historic results. This was not merely an act of defiance, it was a statement of principle, that freedom cannot be subdued by fear, and that a people united under a common purpose can overcome the most formidable challenges. On the world stage, this event resonated far beyond the battlefield. Countries watched in awe as Ukraine turned innovation into a weapon of equalization. It demonstrated how technology, when guided by passion and necessity, becomes a powerful ally for those who refuse to surrender. The attack inspired nations and resistance movements around the globe, reinforcing the idea that victory does not belong exclusively to those with the biggest budgets, but to those who understand the deeper essence of warfare: adaptability, intelligence, and moral conviction. Ukraine has become a symbol of what it means to fight not for conquest, but for survival and self-determination. Within Ukraine itself, this success reignited national pride and strengthened the collective will to persevere. Families who had endured months of fear and uncertainty saw proof that their sacrifices were not in vain. Soldiers on the front lines found renewed confidence, realizing that their fight is not only against weapons, but against the ideology of domination. The drone strike became a rallying point, a moment where technology met patriotism, and courage translated into tangible results. It gave hope to a nation that has endured the unimaginable and yet continues to rise with unbroken spirit. Ultimately, Ukraine's message, through this daring operation, is universal. It tells the world that courage is the most valuable currency in warfare, and that innovation fueled by necessity can outshine wealth fueled by arrogance. The destruction of the Russian fortress was not just a victory of drones over defenses, it was a triumph of determination over despair, of freedom over fear. It showed that even when the odds seem insurmountable, a nation that believes in its cause and dares to act boldly can redefine the meaning of power itself. Ukraine's 500 drones did more than destroy a fortress. They built a legacy of courage that will be remembered long after the smoke has cleared.